I never thought I'd be that woman. You know the one, standing in a hospital corridor, watching her entire life crumble like a sandcastle at high tide. But there I was, frozen in place, staring at my husband of 7 years, cradling a pregnant woman's hand in the maternity ward of St. Mary's Hospital. Not in London, right here in our own city. Let me back up. My name is Emma, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had a pretty solid marriage. Sure, David traveled for work. He was a consultant for a tech firm, or so he said. The London trips had become more frequent over the past year. Big client, he'd explain, kissing my forehead before wheeling his suitcase out the door. You know how it is, babe. They need me on site. I did know how it was. I'd built my own career as a graphic designer, working from our home office while he climbed the corporate ladder. We were a team, or at least I thought we were. The unraveling began with something absurdly mundane, a grocery receipt. I'd been doing laundry, emptying pockets before throwing his jeans in the wash, a ritual so automatic I barely thought about it anymore. But this receipt made me pause. It was from a Tesco, dated from his last London trip, but the location stamp read, Northgate Shopping Center. Our Northgate Shopping Center, the one 15 minutes from our house. My hands started shaking before my brain fully processed why. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he'd mixed up receipts from different trips. Maybe he'd shopped here before leaving. But the date was specific. Last Tuesday, 3:47 p.m. I remembered that day vividly because I'd been home with food poisoning, texting him about how miserable I felt. He'd sent sympathetic messages from London, promising to bring me back some proper English tea. That receipt sat on my desk for 2 days while I wrestled with what to do. Confront him? Investigate further? Pretend I never saw it? The woman I'd been 4 months ago would have asked him directly, trusting in the foundation we'd built together. But something had shifted. Little inconsistencies I'd brushed aside suddenly demanded attention. Like how his London accent had never quite developed despite monthly trips over the past year. How he never had jet lag. How his stories about British colleagues were oddly vague, lacking the specific details he usually reveled in. How he'd stopped suggesting I join him on these trips, though he used to beg me to come along to conferences. I did what any reasonable person in denial would do. I hired a private investigator. Her name was Monica, and she came highly recommended by a college friend who'd gone through a messy divorce. Monica was professional, direct, and kind, in that way people are when they've seen too many marriages fall apart. She didn't make promises. She just asked for David's details and said she'd be in touch. 3 days. That's how long it took. Emma, I think you should come to my office, Monica said over the phone, her voice careful. I have some photographs. The photos were worse than I'd imagined, and I'd imagined pretty badly. David, leaving an apartment building I didn't recognize, his arm around a woman with auburn hair and a distinctly pregnant belly. David at a restaurant, feeding this same woman a bite of dessert, both of them laughing. David kissing her at the doorway of what appeared to be a doctor's office, an OB-GYN, according to Monica's notes. Her name is Claire Mitchell, Monica explained, sliding a file across her desk. She works at the library downtown. They've been together for approximately 18 months. She's 7 months pregnant. 18 months. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of Monica's desk. The London trips? I managed to ask. He books real tickets, I confirmed with the airline. But he doesn't board the flights. He's been staying at her apartment across town. Very careful about it, actually. Separate phone for her that he keeps in his gym bag. Only uses cash at places they go together. 18 months. While I'd been planning our 8th anniversary trip to Italy, he'd been building an entirely separate life with someone else. While I'd been researching fertility treatments because we'd been trying for a baby for 2 years, he'd been getting another woman pregnant. The rage came in waves, but underneath it was something worse, a profound sense of humiliation. How had I not known? What kind of fool had I been? Monica's voice cut through my spiral. There's more. They have a hospital tour scheduled at St. Mary's tomorrow afternoon. Maternity ward. She's pre-registering for delivery. I looked up at her. Tomorrow? 2 p.m. I thought you might want to know. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to David. He'd come back from his day trip to Manchester, and watched him sleep peacefully. this man who'd become a stranger. His phone buzzed once on the nightstand. I saw the screen light up with a message from James Jim. The preview read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby." The baby. Their baby. At 1:30 p.m. the next day, I was parked outside St. Mary's Hospital, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Monica had offered to come with me, but I'd said no. This was something I needed to see with my own eyes, needed to feel in my own heart before I could figure out what came next. I spotted them walking from the parking lot, David carrying a folder of papers, Claire beside him in a floral maternity dress, one hand on her swollen belly. They looked happy. God, they looked so happy. The way he opened doors for her, the way she leaned into him, the way he placed his hand protectively on the small of her back, all the things he used to do for me. I followed them inside, staying far enough back that they wouldn't notice. They checked in at reception, then headed toward the elevators. 4th floor, maternity ward. I took the stairs, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might be sick. When I reached the 4th floor, I saw them down the corridor, being greeted by a cheerful nurse. "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, right this way for your tour." Mrs. Patterson. He'd given her his last name. I walked closer, my feet moving of their own accord. They were standing in front of a window looking into the nursery, his arm around her shoulders. She was laughing at something he'd said, and he was looking at her with such tenderness that it physically hurt to witness. David. My voice came out stronger than I felt. They both turned, and I watched the color drain from his face in real time. Claire looked confused, glancing between us. "Emma." He said my name like a curse. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, surprised by how steady I sounded. "But I think the answer is pretty obvious." Claire's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, you're his wife." 7 years, I confirmed, looking directly at her. "Though apparently I've been sharing him for the last 18 months. Did he tell you about London, or does he use a different city with you?" "Emma, don't do this here," David hissed, moving toward me with his hands raised like I was a wild animal he needed to calm. "Don't do what? Don't embarrass you? Don't ruin your perfect little tour of the maternity ward where your pregnant girlfriend, Mrs. Patterson, is going to deliver the baby you told me we couldn't afford to have?" My voice was rising now, drawing attention from a few passing nurses. Claire was crying, tears streaming down her face. "He told me you were separated. He said the divorce was almost final." I actually laughed at that, a harsh, bitter sound. I'm not even sure which one of us he's lied to more. For the record, we're very much married. No separation, no divorce proceedings. In fact, we had dinner together last night, and he told me about his very productive meeting in Manchester. David's jaw clenched. "Can we please take this somewhere private?" "Why? So you can spin more lies?" "No, I think we're fine right here." I turned back to Claire, who looked devastated. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. She was a victim here too, just a different kind. "How far along are you?" 7 months, she whispered. "Boy or girl?" "Emma," David started, but I cut him off with a look. "Boy or girl?" I repeated. "A boy," Claire said, her voice breaking. "A boy. The baby we'd been trying for. The baby I'd cried over month after month when the pregnancy tests came back negative. The baby he'd held me through disappointment after disappointment about, promising we'd keep trying, promising we'd figure it out together. He'd figured it out all right. Just not with me." "Congratulations," I said, and I meant it. That baby hadn't asked for any of this. "I hope he's healthy." I looked at David one last time. This man I'd loved, trusted, built a life with. He couldn't meet my eyes. "I'll be moved out by the time you get home," I said quietly. "My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce, the real one." I turned and walked away, my heels clicking against the linoleum floor. Behind me, I could hear Claire sobbing and David calling my name, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. If I stopped, I'd fall apart, and I was determined not to give him that satisfaction. I made it to my car before the tears came, great heaving sobs that left me gasping for air. I cried for the marriage I'd lost, for the trust that had been shattered, for the future I'd imagined that would never exist. I cried for the woman I'd been that morning, still clinging to hope that maybe, somehow, this was all a misunderstanding. But mostly, I cried for the time I'd wasted on someone who'd valued me so little. My phone buzzed. Text from David. Please come back. Let me explain. I blocked his number. Another text from Monica. How did it go? Do you need anything? I typed back, can you recommend a good divorce attorney? Her response came immediately. Already sent you 3 names. The first one is a barracuda. Use her. I did use her. Patricia Chen specialized in complex divorces, and she tore apart David's claims of misunderstanding and temporary insanity with surgical precision. He'd opened credit cards I didn't know about to finance his double life. He'd lied on legal documents. He'd committed fraud in my name. The divorce took 8 months, finalized just weeks before Claire gave birth to their son. I heard through mutual friends that they named him Oliver. I felt nothing when I heard that. Not anger, not sadness. Nothing. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about betrayal this deep. It changes you fundamentally. I had to rebuild my understanding of everything. My judgment, my instincts, my ability to trust. I started therapy. I leaned on friends and family in ways I never had before. I threw myself into my work and found that I was actually quite good at it when I wasn't distracted by managing someone else's secrets. 6 months after the divorce was final, I was offered a partnership at a design firm in Seattle. It meant leaving behind everything familiar, but that felt like exactly what I needed. A clean slate, a new city where nobody knew me as David's ex-wife or that poor woman from the hospital. I took the job. On my last day in town, I ran into Claire at a coffee shop. She was alone, pushing a stroller with a sleeping Oliver inside. Our eyes met, and for a moment I thought about turning around and leaving. But something made me stay. Emma, she said softly, I'm so sorry. I know, I said, because I could see in her eyes that she truly was. If it matters, he's miserable. We're not together anymore. Turns out he was cheating on me too, even before Oliver was born. It should have felt like vindication, but it just made me tired. I'm sorry you're going through that. Are you okay? She asked. Really? I thought about that question. Was I okay? I wasn't the woman I'd been a year ago, that Emma was gone, demolished in a hospital corridor. But the woman I was becoming? She was stronger, wiser, more careful with her trust. Yes, but also more confident in her ability to survive anything. I'm getting there, I told her honestly, day by day. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you for not hating me. I don't hate you, I said. I hate what happened, but we were both victims of the same liar. We talked for a few more minutes. Surface pleasantries about Seattle, about her job at the library, about Oliver's sleeping schedule. Then we said goodbye, and I knew I'd probably never see her again. As I walked to my car, I thought about David in that maternity ward, living his double life with such confidence. I thought about how close I'd come to never finding out, to living years more in ignorance. Part of me wished I still didn't know, but a bigger part was grateful for that grocery receipt, for Monica's photographs, for the truth that had set me free even as it shattered me. Seattle was rainy and beautiful. My apartment overlooked the water, and I spent my first night watching the ferries cross the Sound, thinking about navigation and destination and all the ways we think we know where we're going until life redirects us entirely. I'm still rebuilding. Some days are harder than others. I'm cautious in ways I never was before. Maybe too cautious, my therapist gently suggests. But I'm also more myself than I ever was with David. Turns out I'd been making myself smaller to fit into his lies, though I hadn't realized it at the time. My story doesn't have a neat ending because I'm still living it. There's no new romance to report, no triumphant revenge tale where David got exactly what he deserved. Just me, learning to trust myself again. Learning that sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you is also the thing that saves you from wasting more years on the wrong life. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that moment in the maternity ward. The moment when everything I thought I knew dissolved like morning fog. It was horrible and humiliating and heart-shattering. But it was also the moment I started becoming someone I could be proud of again. Someone who wouldn't accept lies. Someone who knew her worth. someone who understood that sometimes love isn't enough when it's built on a foundation of deception. They say the truth will set you free. They don't mention that first. It'll bring you to your knees. But eventually, slowly, painfully, one day at a time, you get back up. And when you do, you're stronger than you ever knew you could be. The Seattle rain had a different quality than what I was used to back home. It wasn't the aggressive downpour that sent people scrambling for cover. It was a persistent mist that settled into everything, soft and relentless. Kind of like grief, I realized during my second week there. You could function through it, go about your day, but it was always there, dampening everything just slightly. My new colleagues at Morrison and Associates Design were welcoming in that careful way people are when they sense you're running from something. Sarah, the senior partner who'd recruited me, took me to lunch on my third day. "So," she said, cutting into her salmon with surgical precision, "are we going to talk about why someone with your talent was willing to relocate across the country with only 2 weeks' notice? Or are we going to pretend this is just an exciting career move?" I appreciated her directness. "Messy divorce. Cheating?" "Spectacularly." She nodded knowingly. "My ex-husband left me for his dental hygienist. Found out when I went in for a cleaning and she was wearing my anniversary earrings." She took a sip of wine. "That was 12 years ago. Best thing that ever happened to me, though I would have punched anyone who said that at the time." "How long until it stopped hurting?" "The acute pain? About a year. The phantom pain, when something reminds you and it catches you off guard, that took longer, but it gets manageable. And then one day you realize you've gone a whole week without thinking about him. And that week becomes a month, and then you honestly can't remember the last time he crossed your mind." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. Work became my salvation and my hiding place. I threw myself into projects with an intensity that probably wasn't healthy but felt necessary. The firm specialized in rebranding campaigns, and there was something therapeutic about taking broken, outdated identities and transforming them into something fresh and authentic. If only personal rebranding were as straightforward as choosing new fonts and color palettes. 3 months into my Seattle life, my phone rang at 2 a.m. unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Emma?" A woman's voice thick with tears. "Who is this?" "It's Claire. I'm sorry to call so late. I didn't know who else." She broke down sobbing. Every instinct told me to hang up. This woman was connected to the worst chapter of my life. But I heard a baby crying in the background, and despite everything, I couldn't just disconnect. "What's wrong?" I asked, sitting up in bed. "David took Oliver. We had a fight about child support. He's been falling behind, and I threatened to take him back to court, and he just grabbed Oliver and left. He won't answer my calls. I don't know where they are. I called the police, but they said since he's the father and there's no custody order yet, there's nothing they can do until morning." My stomach dropped. Whatever David was to me, whatever he'd done, I knew him. And I knew that when he felt cornered, he made impulsive, destructive decisions. "Have you tried his parents' house?" "They won't answer. I think he told them not to." I hesitated. This wasn't my problem. This wasn't my life anymore. I'd moved 1,200 miles to escape exactly this kind of drama. "What about his brother's place?" I found myself saying. "Jake in Portland. David used to go there when he wanted to disappear for a while." "I don't have Jake's number." I did. I still had it buried in my contacts, one of a dozen remnants from my old life I hadn't been able to completely delete. "I'll call him," I said, already regretting it. "But Claire, this is the last time. After this, you don't call me again. Whatever happens with you and David, I can't be part of it." "I understand. Thank you, Emma. Really." I hung up and stared at Jake's name in my phone. David's younger brother had been one of the hardest losses in the divorce. We'd been close, and he'd been genuinely devastated by what David had done. He'd actually testified on my behalf during the divorce proceedings, confirming David's lies about his whereabouts. It had caused a permanent rift between the brothers. The phone rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. "Emma? Jesus, what time is it?" "Jake, I'm sorry to wake you. Is David there?" A pause. Why would David be here? We haven't spoken since the divorce. He took his son. Claire doesn't know where they are, and I thought, shit, hold on. I heard rustling, then a door opening. He's not here, but his car is in my driveway. Emma, what the hell is going on? Check the garage apartment. He has a key, right? More sounds of movement, then, the light's on. I'm going up. A minute later, he's here. He's got the baby. Emma, he's drunk, like really drunk, and the baby is crying. Call Claire, get her the address. And Jake, don't let him leave with that baby. Already on it. Emma, thank you for calling. I lay awake the rest of the night, my mind racing. I kept telling myself it wasn't my concern, that I'd done my duty by making one phone call, that I owed neither Claire nor David anything. But I couldn't shake the image of Oliver, a baby I'd never met, a baby that represented everything I'd lost, in danger because of his father's selfishness. At 7 a.m., my phone buzzed. Text from Jake. Baby is safe with his mom. David's sleeping it off here. I'm sorry you got dragged into this. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow. That incident broke something open in me. I realized that I'd been operating under the assumption that once I got away, once I rebuilt my life, the past would stay neatly contained in its box. But trauma doesn't work that way. People don't work that way. I couldn't move to a new city and become a new person just by changing my zip code. So I did something I'd been avoiding. I started writing about it. It began as journal entries, late-night therapy sessions with my keyboard. But as I wrote, I realized there was a story here. Not just mine, but the story of all the women who'd been where I was. The ones who'd trusted and been betrayed, who'd had their realities rewritten without their consent, who'd had to rebuild from rubble. I started a blog called The Double Life Diaries. Anonymous at first, just my story in raw, unfiltered detail. The grocery receipt, the private investigator, the maternity ward, the aftermath. The response was overwhelming. Within a month, I had thousands of followers, women and some men sharing their own stories in the comments. The executive whose husband had a second family in another state, the woman who discovered her wife had been married to someone else the entire time, the man whose fiancée had been scamming him while planning their wedding. A literary agent reached out. Have you considered turning this into a book? I hadn't. But suddenly it felt like the right next step. Not revenge. I was past that. But maybe meaning. Maybe taking the worst thing that had happened to me and using it to help others feel less alone. 6 months after that late-night call from Claire, I was in a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, working on what had become a book proposal, when someone sat down across from me uninvited. I looked up annoyed, ready to tell them the seat was taken, and froze. David. He looked different. Older. Tired in a way that went bone deep. His usually meticulous appearance had degraded, wrinkled shirt, stubble, dark circles under his eyes. Emma, I thought that was you. What are you doing here? My voice came out sharper than I intended. My hands were shaking. I hated that they were shaking. I'm in town for a conference, Tech Summit at the convention center. He gestured vaguely downtown. I've been trying to find the right time to reach out, to apologize. Properly. You came to Seattle to apologize? No, I came for work. But when I saw the company directory and realized you worked here now, Emma, I need you to know how sorry I am, how much I regret everything. 8 months ago, I would have wanted this, dreamed of it even, the moment when he'd realize what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away. But sitting across from him now, all I felt was exhausted. David, I don't want your apology. Please, just hear me out. He leaned forward and I caught the desperate edge in his voice. Everything fell apart. Claire and I broke up. She won't let me see Oliver without supervised visits. I lost my job. The truth about the fake business trips came out, and they fired me for falsifying expense reports. My parents barely speak to me. Jake won't return my calls. And you thought I'd feel sorry for you? No, God, no. I wanted you to know that you were right. About everything. I destroyed everything good in my life, and I can't even explain why. The therapist I'm seeing says it was self-sabotage, fear of intimacy, unresolved childhood trauma. Stop. I closed my laptop. I don't care why you did it. That's for you and your therapist to work through. But I need you to understand something. I don't forgive you. I don't wish you ill. I genuinely hope you get help and become a better person, especially for your son's sake. But I don't forgive you, and I never will. His face crumpled. Emma, you don't get to be forgiven just because you feel bad. You don't get closure because you apologized. You broke something that can't be fixed, and now you have to live with that. I stood up, gathering my things. I've spent the last year rebuilding myself from what you did. And I'm finally, getting to a place where I don't carry you with me every day. So I'm asking you, please don't contact me again. Not for apologies, not for closure, not for anything. Let me finish healing. I walked out without looking back. My hands were still shaking, but this time it was from adrenaline, not fear. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd claimed my right to move forward without granting him absolution. That night, I wrote about the encounter on my blog. The post went viral, 50,000 shares in 24 hours. Apparently, the idea that victims don't owe their abusers forgiveness resonated with people. The book deal came through 3 weeks later. The Double Life Diaries, a memoir of betrayal and rebuilding, would be published the following fall. Writing the book was harder than I anticipated. It meant reliving everything in granular detail, fact-checking dates and conversations, opening wounds I'd thought were mostly healed. My editor, a sharp woman named Patricia, different Patricia than my lawyer but equally formidable, pushed me to go deeper. The maternity ward scene is powerful, she said during one of our sessions, but I want to know what happened after. The next day, the next week. The readers need to see the full scope of recovery, not just the dramatic moment of discovery. So I wrote about the small deaths that followed the big one. How I'd had to tell my parents, watch their hearts break for me. How I'd had to endure the sympathetic looks from mutual friends who'd known before I did. How I'd had to pack up 7 years of marriage into boxes, deciding what to keep and what to donate, each item a tiny negotiation with grief. I wrote about the panic attacks that came out of nowhere, triggered by a song, a smell, the back of someone's head that looked like David. I wrote about the shame I felt, the irrational belief that I should have known, should have seen the signs, should have been enough to keep him from straying. I wrote about the anger that came in waves, sometimes directed at David, sometimes at Claire, sometimes at myself, for staying asleep so long in a marriage that was already dying. And I wrote about the slow, painful work of rebuilding trust, not just in others, but in myself, in my judgment, in my ability to navigate the world without constant paranoia. During this process, my therapist, Dr. Yolanda Chen, told me something that stuck. Betrayal trauma is unique because it damages your fundamental assumptions about reality. You trusted your perception, your judgment, your partner, and all of those things were proven unreliable simultaneously. Recovery isn't just about processing the loss. It's about reconstructing your entire epistemological framework. In other words, David hadn't just broken my heart. He'd broken my understanding of how I knew what I knew. The book was scheduled to release in October, 14 months after my divorce was finalized. As the date approached, I did something I'd been avoiding. I looked David up on social media. His Facebook profile showed a man trying to rebuild, posts about therapy breakthroughs, photos with Oliver during supervised visits. Claire was carefully cropped out. Inspirational quotes about second chances and growth. A new girlfriend, young, blonde, seemingly unaware of his history. I felt nothing. No anger, no jealousy, no satisfaction. Just a distant acknowledgement that he was a person who existed, somewhere in the world, living a life that no longer intersected with mine in any meaningful way. But then I clicked on Claire's profile. She'd become a single mother advocate, running a blog about co-parenting with a narcissist. Her posts were honest and raw, the financial struggles, the custody battles, the challenge of explaining to Oliver someday why his father couldn't be trusted. She'd also started dating someone new, a kind-looking woman named Rachel, who appeared frequently in photos with her and Oliver. On impulse, I sent her a message. "I saw your blog. You're doing important work. I hope you and Oliver are well." She responded within an hour. "Emma, I think about you often. I hope Seattle is treating you kindly. Thank you for calling Jake that night. You saved Oliver in more ways than one." We didn't become friends. We didn't need to. But there was a recognition between us, an understanding that we'd both survived the same storm and made it to shore, battered but alive. The book launch was both terrifying and cathartic. I did a reading at Elliott Bay Book Company in Seattle, a beautiful independent bookstore that smelled like paper and possibility. I'd invited Sarah and some colleagues from work, a few friends I'd made in Seattle, and Dr. Chen. I didn't expect my brother Marcus to fly in from Chicago. I definitely didn't expect my mother to come, given her fear of flying. But there they were in the third row, tears in their eyes as I read the passage about discovering the truth. The Q&A afterward was intense. A woman in her 60s raised her hand. I found out about my husband's affair 30 years ago. I stayed. We worked through it. But hearing your story, I wonder if I made the right choice. I thought carefully before answering. I can't tell you whether you made the right choice. Every situation is different. Every person's capacity for forgiveness is different. What I can say is that staying has to be a choice you make for you, not because you're afraid of the alternative. And if you stayed, worked through it, and built something genuine on the other side, that's not the same as what happened to me. My husband didn't just cheat. He built an entire second life. There's a difference between a mistake and a pattern of deception. Another hand went up. A young man, maybe mid-20s. Do you think you'll ever trust anyone again? Like, enough to remarry? I don't know, I admitted. Right now, I'm learning to trust myself again. That feels like the necessary first step. Whether I'll get to a place where I can fully trust a partner, I hope so. But I'm not going to rush it. I'd rather be alone and whole than coupled and constantly anxious. After the reading, people lined up for signed copies. Most shared their own stories. Some whispered, some through tears, all of them echoing variations of the same theme. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for making me feel less alone. That, more than the book deal or the reviews or the spot on the local news, felt like redemption. But the universe wasn't done with surprises. A month after the launch, I got an email from a journalist at the Seattle Times. They wanted to do a feature on the book, and they'd managed to track down David for comment. My stomach dropped as I read his statement. Emma's book is her truth, and I respect her need to tell her story. I was a flawed husband who made terrible mistakes. I'm focused now on being a better father and a better person. I wish her nothing but happiness. It was measured, apologetic, perfectly crafted to make him look like a man who'd grown. And maybe he had. Maybe his therapy was working. Maybe he really was becoming better. But reading those words, I realized something. It didn't matter. His growth, his healing, his journey, none of it had anything to do with me anymore. He could become a saint, and it wouldn't change what happened. He could remain a disaster, and it wouldn't affect my recovery. We were separate people, living separate lives, connected only by a shared past that grew smaller in the rearview mirror with each passing day. I wrote back to the journalist, I have no comment on David's statement. My book speaks for itself. By the time the article ran, I'd already moved on to my next project. A woman from Portland had reached out through my blog. Her husband had died in a car accident, and she discovered afterward that he'd had 3 different families, none of whom knew about the others. She wanted help telling her story. I'd found my calling, giving voice to the people whose lives had been hijacked by someone else's lies, helping them process, heal, and reclaim their narratives. The holidays came, my first in Seattle, my second since the divorce. I'd been dreading them, remembering how David and I used to host elaborate dinner parties, how we'd had traditions and routines that now felt like they belonged to someone else's life. But Sarah invited me to her place for Thanksgiving, a chaotic, joyful gathering of chosen family, people who'd all found each other after their own various life catastrophes. There was Marcus, Sarah's brother, who'd lost his wife to cancer, Amy, who'd left an abusive marriage with her 3 kids, Tony and his husband, James, who'd both been disowned by their families for being gay. We went around the table sharing what we were grateful for. When it came to me, I surprised myself. I'm grateful for the grocery receipt. Everyone looked confused except Sarah, who'd heard the whole story. The grocery receipt that showed my ex-husband wasn't where he said he was, I explained. Because without that receipt, I might still be living in a lie. I might have wasted more years, maybe decades, before finding out the truth. That receipt was the thread that, when I pulled it, unraveled everything, and yeah, it was devastating. But it also freed me. So I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for all the painful truths that forced me to rebuild. Amy raised her glass. To painful truths. To painful truths. We echoed and drank. Later that night, helping Sarah clean up, she asked me, "Are you happy?" I considered the question honestly. Was I happy? I wasn't carefree. I wasn't naive anymore. I carried scars that would probably never fully fade. But I was also more myself than I'd ever been. I was doing work I found meaningful. I was surrounded by people I genuinely loved. I was learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions instead of running from them. "I'm getting there," I said. "Some days are better than others. But yeah, I think I'm happy. Or at least, I'm happy enough." "That's all any of us can hope for," Sarah said, squeezing my shoulder. Happy enough, with room to grow. The new year brought new beginnings. My blog had grown to over 100,000 followers. I'd been invited to speak at a conference on trauma recovery. A production company had reached out about potentially developing my book into a limited series. And then, on a rainy Tuesday in February, because of course it was raining, I met someone. His name was Michael, and he was the barista at my regular coffee shop. We'd been doing the polite stranger dance for months. Friendly hellos, small talk about the weather, the occasional joke about my apparent caffeine addiction. But on this particular Tuesday, he wrote his phone number on my cup along with, "Dinner, only if you want to. No pressure. M." I stared at that number for 3 days. Dr. Chen and I spent an entire session discussing it. "What are you afraid of?" she asked. "That I'll miss the signs again. That I'll trust someone who doesn't deserve it. That I'll build something real only to discover it was fake the whole time." "Those are valid fears," she acknowledged. "They're also prison bars if you let them be. You can't control whether someone will betray you, but you can control whether you let fear stop you from living." So I called him. We met for dinner at a small Italian place in Fremont. I was so nervous I almost canceled 3 times. But when I walked in and saw him waiting, smiling, genuinely happy to see me, something in my chest loosened. My stomach dropped as I read his statement. Emma's book is her truth, and I respect her need to tell her story. I was a flawed husband who made terrible mistakes. I'm focused now on being a better father and a better person. I wish her nothing but happiness. It was measured, apologetic, perfectly crafted to make him look like a man who'd grown. And maybe he had. Maybe his therapy was working. Maybe he really was becoming better. But reading those words, I realized something. It didn't matter. His growth, his healing, his journey, none of it had anything to do with me anymore. He could become a saint, and it wouldn't change what happened. He could remain a disaster, and it wouldn't affect my recovery. We were separate people, living separate lives, connected only by a shared past that grew smaller in the rearview mirror with each passing day. I wrote back to the journalist, "I have no comment on David's statement. My book speaks for itself." By the time the article ran, I'd already moved on to my next project. A woman from Portland had reached out through my blog. Her husband had died in a car accident, and she discovered afterward that he'd had 3 different families, none of whom knew about the others. She wanted help telling her story. I'd found my calling, giving voice to the people whose lives had been hijacked by someone else's lies, helping them process, heal, and reclaim their narratives. The holidays came, my first in Seattle, my second since the divorce. I'd been dreading them, remembering how David and I used to host elaborate dinner parties, how we'd had traditions and routines that now felt like they belonged to someone else's life. But Sarah invited me to her place for Thanksgiving, a chaotic, joyful gathering of chosen family, people who'd all found each other after their own various life catastrophes. There was Marcus, Sarah's brother, who'd lost his wife to cancer, Amy, who'd left an abusive marriage with her 3 kids, Tony and his husband James, who'd both been disowned by their families for being gay. We went around the table sharing what we were grateful for. When it came to me, I surprised myself. I'm grateful for the grocery receipt. Everyone looked confused except Sarah, who'd heard the whole story. "The grocery receipt that showed my ex-husband wasn't where he said he was," I explained. "Because without that receipt, I might still be living in a lie. I might have wasted more years, maybe decades, before finding out the truth. That receipt was the thread that, when I pulled it, unraveled everything, and yeah, it was devastating. But it also freed me. So I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for all the painful truths that forced me to rebuild." Amy raised her glass. "To painful truths." To painful truths, we echoed and drank. Later that night, helping Sarah clean up, she asked me, "Are you happy?" I considered the question honestly. Was I happy? I wasn't carefree. I wasn't naive anymore. I carried scars that would probably never fully fade. But I was also more myself than I'd ever been. I was doing work I found meaningful. I was surrounded by people I genuinely loved. I was learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions instead of running from them. "I'm getting there," I said. "Some days are better than others. But yeah, I think I'm happy. Or at least, I'm happy enough." "That's all any of us can hope for," Sarah said, squeezing my shoulder. Happy enough, with room to grow. The new year brought new beginnings. My blog had grown to over 100,000 followers. I'd been invited to speak at a conference on trauma recovery. A production company had reached out about potentially developing my book into a limited series. And then, on a rainy Tuesday in February, because of course it was raining, I met someone. His name was Michael, and he was the barista at my regular coffee shop. We'd been doing the polite stranger dance for months. Friendly hellos, small talk about the weather, the occasional joke about my apparent caffeine addiction. But on this particular Tuesday, he wrote his phone number on my cup along with, "Dinner, only if you want to. No pressure. M." I stared at that number for 3 days. Dr. Chen and I spent an entire session discussing it. "What are you afraid of?" she asked. "That I'll miss the signs again. That I'll trust someone who doesn't deserve it. That I'll build something real only to discover it was fake the whole time." "Those are valid fears," she acknowledged. "They're also prison bars if you let them be. You can't control whether someone will betray you, but you can control whether you let fear stop you from living." So I called him. We met for dinner at a small Italian place in Fremont. I was so nervous I almost canceled 3 times. But when I walked in and saw him waiting, smiling, genuinely happy to see me, something in my chest loosened. "Full disclosure," I said after we'd ordered. "I'm divorced, recently. It was bad, and I'm probably going to be weird about trust for a while." "Full disclosure," he replied. "I'm divorced too, 5 years ago. She left me for her yoga instructor, which is such a cliche I can actually laugh about it now. Took about 3 years to get to the laughing part, though. What changed after 3 years? I stopped trying to figure out what I did wrong and started accepting that sometimes people are just incompatible, and sometimes people make selfish choices, and sometimes both things are true." He met my eyes. "I'm not looking for anything serious right now. I just thought you seemed interesting, and I'd like to get to know you. If that's too much or too fast, or if you're not interested, that's completely fine." The honesty was disarming. "I think I'd like to get to know you too," I said. Slowly, with full transparency, and maybe some therapy check-ins. He laughed. "I can work with that." We didn't fall in love that night. We didn't even kiss. But we talked for 3 hours about books and travel and the strange experience of rebuilding yourself after someone else breaks you. He told me about his daughter from his first marriage, now 16 and living with her mom. I told him about the book, about David, about the maternity ward. "That's brutal," he said quietly. "I'm sorry you went through that. I'm sorry you got left for a yoga instructor. At least it wasn't a cliche, like a secretary or a personal trainer." He grinned. Though I have to admit, the yoga thing stung extra because I'd been paying for her classes. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like months. We started seeing each other casually. Coffee dates, walks around Green Lake, occasional dinners. He met my pace without pushing, respected my boundaries without taking it personally. When I had a panic attack after seeing a pregnant woman at the grocery store, he sat with me in the parking lot until I could breathe normally again, not trying to fix it, just being present. "Is this how it's supposed to feel?" I asked Dr. Chen after a month of dating Michael. "Because it feels too easy, like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." "Healthy relationships often feel boring to people who've been through trauma," she explained. "You're used to chaos, to walking on eggshells, to constantly monitoring for threats. Safety feels unfamiliar, so your brain interprets it as suspicious. It's going to take time to retrain yourself to recognize that stability isn't a red flag. It's actually the goal." Michael and I had been together for 3 months when he asked me to meet his daughter, Zoe. I was terrified. What if she hated me? What if this was too much too soon? What if I was completely out of my depth trying to navigate a relationship with someone who had a teenager? But Zoe turned out to be sharp and funny, with her dad's easy laugh and her own fierce intelligence. Over dinner, she asked me directly, "So, are you and my dad, like, serious?" Michael started to deflect, but I answered honestly, "We're taking things slow. Your dad and I have both been through divorces, so we're being careful. But I really like him, and I really like you, and I hope we can all be friends, whatever this turns into." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Fair. My mom's dating someone new, too. It's weird, but whatever. As long as everyone's honest about it, I guess." Out of the mouths of 16-year-olds. That spring, a year and a half after the maternity ward, I got an unexpected email from Jake, David's brother. "Emma, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to let you know that David's in rehab, alcohol. He had a DUI with Oliver in the car. Don't worry, Oliver's fine, just shaken up. But it was a wake-up call. Claire's pursuing full custody, and honestly, I think that's the right call. I know you don't want to be involved, and I respect that. I just thought you should know. Also, I read your book. It was hard to read, but important. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth, even when it implicated my family. I hope Seattle is everything you needed it to be. Jake." I sat with that email for a long time. Part of me felt vindicated. See, he really was as messed up as I thought. Part of me felt sad for Oliver, growing up with a father who couldn't get his act together. And a small part of me felt sad for David, trapped in whatever demons drove him to destroy everything he touched. But mostly, I felt grateful that it wasn't my problem anymore. I wrote back, "Thank you for letting me know. I hope he gets the help he needs, for Oliver's sake, if not his own. And thank you for testifying during the divorce. It meant more than you know. Take care, Jake." Short, kind, final. By summer, Michael and I had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. We'd agreed to be exclusive, but were taking our time with labels and long-term plans. We were at a farmer's market when I saw them, David and his new girlfriend, pushing a stroller with Oliver in it. It was his supervised visitation day, apparently now allowed at public places with his girlfriend present. My first instinct was to run, but Michael felt me tense and followed my gaze. "Is that him?" "Yeah." "Do you want to leave?" I thought about it. A year ago, I would have said yes immediately. 6 months ago, maybe. But now? No, I'm okay. And the strange thing was, I really was. David didn't see me. He was focused on Oliver, trying to make him laugh. His girlfriend looked stressed, hypervigilant in the way new partners of messy people always are. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself once upon a time. We walked past them without incident. No dramatic confrontation, no need for words. Just two people who used to be married, now existing in the same physical space without it meaning anything. "How are you feeling?" Michael asked later, as we sat on his back porch watching the sunset. "Weird, but okay. It's like, he was such a huge part of my life for so long, and now he's just a guy I used to know. It feels anticlimactic." "Maybe that's what healing looks like," Michael suggested. "Not the dramatic moment of forgiveness or confrontation, but just the slow realization that they don't matter to you anymore." He was right, and that realization felt like the final piece of something clicking into place. That fall, I made a decision. I was going to adopt a dog. Dr. Chen was delighted. "This is huge," she said. "You're committing to caring for another being, planning for a future, creating stability. A year ago, you could barely commit to a lease renewal." I found her at a rescue, a 3-year-old mutt named Luna who'd been found abandoned on the side of a highway. She was skittish at first, afraid of loud noises and sudden movements, but slowly, with patience and consistency, she learned to trust. We healed together, Luna and I. On hard days, when the past felt heavy, I'd take her to the dog park and watch her run, absolutely joyful in the simple act of being alive. It was a good reminder. 2 years after the maternity ward, I got a call from my publisher. The Double Life Diaries was being optioned for a film. They wanted me involved as a consultant. "There's just one thing," my editor said. "They'll need releases from the key figures in the book, including David." I hadn't spoken to David in over a year, hadn't thought about him in months. The idea of reaching out felt like regression. What happens if he doesn't sign? I asked. They can change names, alter identifying details, but it's better if everyone signs, more authentic. I asked for time to think about it. That night, I talked it through with Michael. Part of me wants to say no, to not give him any opportunity to be involved. But another part thinks maybe this is the universe giving me a chance at real closure. What would closure look like to you? I don't know. Maybe just ending on my own terms instead of how things ended before. I drafted an email. David, this is Emma. I hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out because my book is being adapted for film, and the production company is requesting releases from everyone depicted. I'm not asking you to participate or be involved, just to sign a release allowing them to portray your character, under a different name, based on the events described in the book. If you're not comfortable with this, I understand. They can work around it. But I wanted to ask directly, rather than going through lawyers. I hope you're doing better than you were. I hope you're being a good father to Oliver. Emma. He responded within 24 hours. Emma, I'll sign whatever you need. You have my word. And thank you for asking directly instead of blindsiding me. I'm 8 months sober. Therapy twice a week. Working on myself. I have limited visitation with Oliver, but I'm showing up for every minute I'm allowed. Claire and I are actually civil now, which feels like a miracle. I read your book. It was brutal to see myself through your eyes, but I needed to see it. You were fair, even when you could have destroyed me. I'm grateful for that. I won't pretend I deserve forgiveness or that I can ever make up for what I did. But I am genuinely sorry, and I'm genuinely trying to be better. I hope Seattle is good to you. I hope you're happy. David. I read the email 3 times. There was no manipulation in it, no attempt to worm his way back into my life. Just a simple acknowledgement of harm done and growth attempted. I signed the film contract. David signed the release. And that was the last communication we ever had. The film premiered at Sundance 2 years later. I walked the red carpet with Michael, who'd proposed 6 months earlier with a simple question. What do you think about building something permanent together? We'd gotten married at a small ceremony on a beach in Oregon. Just close friends and family. Luna as our flower dog. It was nothing like my first wedding, which had been elaborate and performative. This one was quiet, intentional, real. Watching my story on screen was surreal. The actress playing me captured something I hadn't even realized I'd felt. The moment in the maternity ward where you can actually see her deciding to save herself. The film didn't sugarcoat the aftermath. The therapy sessions, the panic attacks, the slow, unglamorous work of healing. The actress playing David asked me once during filming, "Did you ever love him? Really love him?" "Yes," I'd answered honestly, but I loved a version of him that didn't fully exist. Or maybe he did exist sometimes, but not consistently enough to build a life on. That's the hard part. Mourning someone who isn't actually dead, just revealed to be different than you thought. The film ended not with me finding Michael, but with me alone in my Seattle apartment, writing at my laptop, Luna asleep at my feet. The final voiceover was pulled directly from my book. Healing isn't a straight line. It's not even a wavy line. It's more like a spiral. You keep circling past the same painful spots, but each time from a slightly higher vantage point. Until one day, you realize you're looking down at where you were, not stuck in it anymore. And that's when you know. You didn't just survive. You transformed. The credits rolled. The audience applauded. And I sat there, holding Michael's hand, thinking about grocery receipts and maternity wards and all the ways life breaks you open just to show you what you're made of. 5 years after that day in St. Mary's Hospital, I got one final piece of closure I didn't know I needed. I was at a coffee shop in Belltown, working on my second book, this one about rebuilding trust after betrayal, when someone approached my table. "Emma?" I looked up to see Claire, looking healthy and happy, a different person than the pregnant woman I'd confronted in a hospital corridor. "Claire, hi. I'm in town for a library conference. I saw you and—" She hesitated. "I wanted to thank you for everything, for that phone call to Jake, for being kind when you had every reason not to be, for your book. It helped me understand my own experience better. How's Oliver?" Her face lit up. "He's 7 now. Smart, funny, kind. David sees him twice a month, supervised. He's sober, which is good. But Oliver's therapist says he's doing well, all things considered. Rachel, my wife, she's amazing with him. I'm glad, I said and meant it. I just wanted you to know, Claire continued, that I think about you sometimes, about how you handled everything with so much grace. I don't know if I could have done the same. You did handle it the same, I pointed out. You survived, rebuilt, found love again. We both did what we had to do. She smiled, tears in her eyes.